When my sister found out she couldn't have kids, the heartbreak felt like a physical thing that settled in the center of our home and refused to leave. We all watched her shrink around that news, the bright, energetic woman who used to plan surprise birthdays and remember tiny details about everyone's lives became quieter, more careful with her smiles, as if she were conserving them for a future she feared she'd never have. The way she touched the photos of babies in magazines, the way she lingered by the nursery section in stores, it all made us ache with her. None of us could have imagined that the thing that started as a private sorrow would spiral into a nightmare that would tear our family apart. What happened next wasn't simply betrayal. It was a betrayal that came wrapped in a twisted attempt at compassion, and it left devastation in its wake. It began, I think, with desperation. Watching two people you love try and fail, time and time again, changes how you see them. Ryan, my brother-in-law, started to look different to me. At first it was subtle. He'd stay late at work more often, or lose himself in his phone in the middle of a family dinner. But what made me uneasy wasn't the secrecy itself. It was the intensity behind it, the way his anger and sorrow seemed to harden into a kind of resolve. He stopped being the guy who made jokes about ridiculous things and became a man on a mission. He told himself he was being practical, that he was protecting Emily from more pain, but the lines between protection and ownership blurred until there was no way to tell them apart. The months after the diagnosis were full of hospital appointments, fertility clinics, and a roller coaster of hope and disappointment. Emily put on a brave face for us, but I could see the cost. She started canceling plans and staying in bed for hours after she thought no one was watching. Ryan's solution, when it finally arrived, was presented as love and logic. He would find a way to give Emily the child she wanted. He promised she'd get everything she deserved. That promise was what fooled everyone who wanted to believe him, because who could refuse a man trying to fix his wife's pain? Who could see the manipulation underneath a plan that sounded, at face value, so noble? There were clues, of course, but they were easy to dismiss. At family gatherings Ryan would sit a little too far away, distracted. Emily would ask him a question and he'd stare past her instead of at her. People began to gossip. What else do small towns do when a family crisis becomes public? But it wasn't until Emily found the messages on his phone that the whole ugly truth was exposed in plain text. That morning is carved into my memory, her voice on the phone, raw and trembling, the words coming out in broken bursts. She had found messages between Ryan and Hannah, Emily's own best friend, the woman who had held Emily's hand through heartbreaks, the one who had promised to stand by her through anything. The messages weren't flirtatious, they were transactional, carefully constructed, written like a script meant to convince, manipulate, cajole. Ryan had convinced Hannah to become a surrogate, but not through a clinic or with legal protections or counseling. It was secret. It was supposed to be a private agreement between them, a way to provide Emily with a child without the legal mess or the emotional complexity of adoption. Ryan told Hannah that Emily wanted this, that Emily had given permission. Hannah, who loved Emily and felt powerless watching her friend suffer, agreed, because she thought she was helping. In reality, she was being used. Ryan painted a picture of a future where everyone would be happy, a fairy tale in which Emily would finally hold a child and they'd all pretend the lines had never been crossed. It was manipulation dressed as sacrifice. When Emily confronted Ryan, it became painfully clear that his concept of helping was built on erasing her autonomy. He didn't deny the messages or the plan. Instead, he justified it, telling her he was doing what needed to be done. He said, "One day you'll thank me." Those words, spoken with a calmness that chilled me, were like a final closing of the door between them. Emily felt betrayed not only by her husband but by her friend, and the resulting fracture wasn't a single crack. It splintered into a million shards that cut everyone who tried to touch them. My parents were outraged. My father stormed out of the house and demanded Ryan leave. Our family dinners stopped being the warm, noisy events they'd always been. They became battlegrounds, with silence as the weapon everyone wielded. The small town reacted with fury and curiosity in equal measure. Rumors grew like wild vines, facts were indistinguishable from speculation. Hannah's family, embarrassed and ashamed, withdrew from the community. People whispered that Hannah had been reckless, that she had betrayed Emily for attention or romance. The truth was messy. Hannah had been lonely and manipulated by a man who sold the illusion of shared purpose. She had allowed herself to hope that she could perform an act of generosity that wouldn't harm anyone. The reality forced her to face consequences she had never imagined. She became an outcast, carrying a baby that symbolized more pain than joy for everyone involved. Ryan's next move was the most audacious and cruel of all. He vanished for a while, and we thought maybe he'd left town to escape the scandal. But when he reappeared months later holding a baby, calm and determined, he claimed the child as a bridge to reconciliation. "This is Emily's son," he said, as if facts could be created from intention. Watching him stand there, the baby in his arms, I felt something inside me cold and broken. Emily's eyes filled with a storm of emotions, anger, grief, disbelief. The sight of her husband parading this child in front of her felt like salt rubbed into a wound. He wanted to force a family back together using a human being as a bargaining chip. It was grotesque. Emily's refusal was definitive. She shut the door on him and on the life they had tried to build. But the consequences didn't stop with individual choices. They rippled outward. Hannah, facing judgment and isolation, decided she couldn't parent the child. The trauma of being the center of a scandal, the loss of friends and family support, became too much. She made the agonizing decision to place the baby for adoption, hoping that maybe, in another home, the child could be loved without the baggage of our family's betrayal. Watching her let go was one of the hardest things I have ever witnessed. There are no winners in a situation like that, only survivors trying to stitch together something resembling normalcy. What struck me in the years that followed wasn't only the pain but the way people rationalized their roles in the tragedy. Ryan's defense was always some variation of, "I was trying to help," as if the ends justified 100 means that trampled consent, friendship, and dignity. Hannah would later admit to me, in a private conversation where the rawness of her remorse still smelled like fresh grief, that she felt ashamed and used and that she had underestimated how easily intentions can be weaponized. Emily, meanwhile, began a slow, deliberate process of reclaiming herself. She went to therapy, not because she wanted to be fixed but because she wanted tools to be whole again. She found work that mattered, volunteer shifts at a children's hospital and later with a non-profit that supported women facing fertility challenges. She learned, on a daily basis, to separate who she was from what had been done to her. Our family's dynamic changed permanently. My parents aged faster, their trust in people eroded. Holidays that had once meant laughter and crowded tables became careful negotiations around who could be in the same room. Some relatives took sides, others retreated, unable to cope with the moral complexity. Friends dropped away, allegiances hardened, and through it all Emily, who had been at the center of it, was the one who eventually emerged with a quiet, steady resilience that surprised us all. She refused to let her identity be defined solely by loss. She cultivated friendships with people who treated her with tenderness and respect, and she built a life that honored her values. She found joy in small things, a well-timed joke, a new plant on the windowsill, the steady comfort of mornings with a book and coffee. As for Ryan, people told different stories. Some said he moved away to start over in anonymity. Others whispered about a man who couldn't sleep, who filled the emptiness with work and muttered justifications for choices he could no longer undo. Whatever the truth, the consequences were real. His marriage ended, his friendships dissolved, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. He had wanted to create a family at any cost, but what he created instead was a legacy of mistrust and ruin. It felt like poetic justice and empty punishment at the same time, because the damage had already been done and could not be measured or repaired by any amount of regret. In the quiet of later years, when the immediate anger had cooled into a steadier sorrow, we tried to make sense of the lessons this taught us. The first is a simple, brutal truth: desperation can cloud judgment and make people justify anything. When you watch the person you love suffer, the urge to do something, anything, to stop their pain is powerful, but power without empathy and consent becomes harm. The second lesson is about boundaries. Love that seeks to own, control, or substitute for another human being's autonomy is not love at all. And the third is about resilience, how people can survive betrayals meant to define them and instead use those experiences to cultivate gentleness, to offer compassion to others who are suffering. Years later, Emily remarried, not quickly, not to fill a void, but to share life with someone who understood and respected all parts of her story. She never had biological children, but she did become a mother in other ways, through caregiving, mentorship, and the profound ways she nurtured those around her. Hannah found small ways to rebuild too, working in community outreach and slowly regaining the trust of some people, though not all. She volunteered at support groups for women, using her story as a cautionary tale about the cost of being manipulated by good intentions. Our family, though never quite the same, learned to celebrate small victories: a joyful birthday, a graduation, a quiet Sunday where laughter felt natural again. If there's one abiding image that stays with me, it's this: a woman standing in sunlight with her arms open, not to receive something she lost but to give care and compassion where she can. Emily taught me that identity isn't a wound to be healed by other people's solutions. It's a life to be rebuilt, step by step, with stubborn kindness. Ryan taught me, painfully, that love without respect for autonomy becomes control. Hannah taught me how fragile people can be when they try to do the right thing for the wrong reasons. And our family learned the hard way that the road to repair is long and requires humility, truth-telling, and the courage to let go of the illusions that caused the harm in the first place. Looking back, the scandal that rocked our family felt like a storm that changed the landscape forever. Trees were uprooted, houses damaged, and yet, slowly, new growth appeared. Some branches healed, others never did. The shock that first hit us, the betrayal, the secret plan, the manipulations, left scars, but it also forced conversations we might never have had about consent, about power, and about how to support someone without taking over their life. Emily found a deeper compassion in the aftermath, one tempered by boundaries and self-respect. She learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to sit with their pain without trying to fix it for them. And in that patient companionship, she found a different kind of family, one not defined by blood or by the secrets that almost destroyed us, but by the intentional choices to show up, to listen, and to heal together.